Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Welcome back to By Design and Happy New Year. I hope everyone's had a good start to the new year. Today, I wanted to talk about something which I really feel quite passionate about and something that I wish I would have given more thought and had more advice on when I was younger. And it's this whole idea around the dream job. Okay? I think it's quite easy to be seduced by people online saying, oh, just follow your passions, etc. But it's also very easy to be dissuaded by people who say, no, just follow this set career plan. That's the best way to go. So I just wanted to dive into it a little bit, coming from a position where I potentially have done a little bit of both. So the context behind this episode is that online forums nowadays are completely saturated with a sense of disillusionment, especially amongst people who are in my industry but a little bit earlier on in their career, amongst young creatives. So the whole narrative of the dream job, particularly in slightly more prestigious fields or slightly more competitive fields like sports marketing, graphic design, being a creative, fashion, this kind of thing, it's been dismantled by what is quite a harsh reality of can be low wages, it can be burnout, it can be the cost of living crisis in major hubs where these jobs are more abundant, for example, like in London. And to start off the episode, I wanted to go into what passion actually is, because I think we've got a sense of what it might be, but we haven't looked into the etymology of the word itself. So I've got some notes here. The word passion originates from the Latin passio, meaning suffering or enduring, and it's derived from the verb pati, which is to suffer. So essentially, we can understand this as passion is something that you're willing to suffer for. This definition goes on. So it entered English via Old French and initially referred to the suffering of Christ, the passion of Christ, before evolving in meaning to describe intense emotion, strong feeling, or enthusiasm, still retaining the sense of being compelled or enduring something. So it literally means suffering, and the entire takeaway for certainly for the context of this episode is that the modern sense of what we might consider passionate love for something or for someone or an intense interest in something or someone, it develops from the original meaning, and the original meaning was that of enduring great pain or being acted upon by a powerful force. So if we remodel passion as being something, if we're passionate about something, it means that there is something that we are willing to suffer for, then I think that remodels it in quite a useful way. What is it that we're willing to suffer for? If you're willing to suffer to be a creative, then you're passionate about it, right? It's a different way of considering it. I did have a link to some Reddit pages where there's people talking about whether it's realistic to be passionate about things, whether creative industries are realistic, etc. So there's one Reddit thread that talks about whether it's realistic for the average UK worker to buy a home in 2025. Now, we know that the inflation of house prices has far accelerated beyond the inflation of average wages. So it's a lot more difficult to buy a home with an average wage than it has been in the past, for sure. Whether it's still a viable goal for young people as well is up for debate. I think that average age of home buyers now is early 30s, like 33 or 34 or something. Yes, it can be achievable, but there are certain contexts involved. One person has said, yes, it's achievable, but not south of Milton Keynes, i.e., if you live in London or further south of London in Kent or Brighton or something, it's not very likely. Obviously, it's more likely if you have two incomes to pay off the mortgage. There are various things like this. But if you're a lone creative, as in you're striving for yourself and you're not planning to buy with anyone else, it can be really difficult because salaries in the creative industries are generally notoriously quite low, especially if you're freelancing. The day rate can sometimes be more lucrative, but it's inconsistent, and there's not a lot of security in there. So, is it viable for a creative to buy a house, for example? And that again is something that, unfortunately, as creatives, we might need to toss up. Are we more passionate to be a creative, or are we more passionate about buying a house earlier? I.e., which is it that we're more willing to suffer for? Because if we're more willing to be a creative, if we're more passionate about being a creative, it means that we're willing to suffer more in order to be a creative. And that suffering can come in the form of not buying a house, potentially. If you're more passionate about buying a house, then that passion, that suffering, could come in the form of not being a creative, because there are far more lucrative jobs out there at a younger age than being a creative. It's not right or wrong, it's just the way that it is. I'm not going to go into it, but there's even a Reddit thread saying the 2008 to 2012 financial crisis versus the 2025 cost of living crisis, which is worse. And it's not fair to compare traumatic events or economic difficulties at all. But the fact that that thread actually exists should hopefully paint a picture and give a bit of clarity and potentially a bit of comfort to anyone who's struggling, in that, the cost of living crisis is difficult. And to young people trying to make a career, trying to understand the world, it's a difficult climate in which to do that. But hopefully, you've got some of the tools to make the most of your abilities and to help develop your abilities. But I think we need to do away with this idea of, if you're passionate about something, you're absolutely going to succeed in it and the passion will just be able to carry you through. We should actually look at passion as being this, as having a sunk cost. If we're passionate about something, it means that we should be willing to suffer in order to get it. That's like the original definition of it. There's also Reddit threads that are revealing a growing movement of anti-ambition. This is the opposite side, where Gen Z and younger millennials are actively rejecting the corporate ladder in favor of lazy jobs or roles that simply fund their lives rather than define their identities. And I think this is almost a natural continuation of things. It makes a lot of sense that this is what's happening, because the corporate ladder doesn't promise what it used to. There's not the same amount of security going the corporate route as there used to be. So, of course, there's going to be anti-ambition. There was someone talking to me within the past year or so about quiet quitting, where you just kind of do the bare minimum in a job. Now, I'm not endorsing this. I actually think that you should work as hard as you can in everything that you've got. But if you're not earning, if you're not learning, or if you're not growing in a job, then it's worth considering, I think, and this is what my mentors have told me, it's worth considering what it is that you're doing there. If you're not earning a lot of money, if you're not learning skills for the future and developing yourself from a career perspective, or growing in terms of growing your network and growing your abilities as well, then what is it that you're doing there? And for some people, not having any of those three is fine, but it's worth considering it. This anti-ambition isn't even referring to not having any of those three. This anti-ambition is referring to only having the earning side of it. And then the other two bits, you can just be hands off. You go in there, collect a check, and that's it. And that's fine. There's a Reddit thread that talks about those who are not interested in climbing the corporate ladder. Why are you not interested in going up the ladder? And people say, like, for example, life's short. You get 60 to 80 years if you're lucky, and it's far too short to spend lining some rich person's pockets hoping you get a slice of the pie. Fair enough. If you don't want to climb the corporate ladder, that's completely fair. I'd rather put mental energy into family and friends. Again, completely valid. This is, again, what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you're willing to suffer for? Another person said, I have absolutely zero desire to manage people. I'm more than happy at the top of my technical tree. I know plenty of people like this, where they've climbed to a certain bit and they don't desire to go any further up. They're comfortable where they're at, and that's completely fine with them, and that's fine. The pyramid scheme, the natural pyramid scheme of corporate life doesn't appeal to some people. I don't want to work. Work is only a means to an end. I want to be happy. I don't want any more responsibility. I've done it already and it's not worth it. Like all of these different things. And these are all valid. If that's the way that you feel, then that's the way that you feel. And I'm not here to tell anyone what's right or wrong, but it's just to observe the fact that there are some people who are just completely not interested in climbing that corporate ladder and are more than happy to stay in one place. Now, I don't want to give into any dogma or anything, but I do think that it's an objective fact that if you're not moving forward, unfortunately, in the grand scheme of things, you are falling behind because the world continues to move forward. A good analogy for this is if you keep money in a bank that has zero interest on it, you are losing money year on year because of inflation. Whatever the rate of inflation is, it means that your money is worth less next year. And similarly, if you are stagnant and not moving forward, it means that you are falling behind to some degree. And that could be completely fine with you, but I think it's important to be aware of that. There is a very specific recurring complaint about the passion tax, which is an unspoken industry expectation that working in what is considered as cool environments culturally, whether it be generally things that contribute to culture. It could be sport, music, fashion, these types of creative industries. Working in those industries justifies lower pay with longer hours and slightly precarious contracts. And from my observations, it's gotten to the point where the work that creatives are doing isn't necessarily that good anymore because the industry is prioritizing quantity over quality and capital over value. For example, we can look at the merch from musicians, right? It's often poorly designed, it arrives late, it's made on cheap materials, it's not even made properly. Like the thing that you buy on the website is not at all what you receive because these people, the corporations, are just trying to get as many pre-orders as possible and fulfill those orders at the cheapest price with essentially an MVP, a minimum viable product. And often because of the cultural notoriety that these musicians have, these corporations can sell this merch at eye-watering prices where the markup is absolutely huge. I guarantee that for a lot of the merch, the poor quality merch that we might receive, it costs a couple of pounds for the corporation to make, but they'll be selling it for hundreds at times. And if you can do that repeatedly, it's like the capitalist dream, but it is just a case where when we prioritize quantity over quality, then the work that creatives are doing isn't actually that good anymore. And they're getting paid very little. So the actual caring about that output isn't necessarily there because money makes people care. It's just the way that it is in a capitalist system. It's just the way that it is. So we really need to look into that. If there's a lot of money being made off of the work of creatives and off of creative work, then the creatives should get paid equally for that. Now, I'm not, as a sole person, going to change the game here, but I think I've observed different events and I've participated in different events that evidences just how desperate creatives can be to be seen and to be valued externally. I'll always refer back to it when Clint 419, the owner of Cortez, when he did a competition over on Twitter and said that the winner of the competition would get 5 grand, £5,000, British pounds. He said you needed to create you needed to design a lookbook of 10 pieces. A bunch of people entered, actually did free work for Cortez. One person did win the 5 grand, but the graphic design community, and it had to be within 24 hours or something. And the graphic design community was absolutely fuming with everyone, including me, who entered, because we didn't put any watermarks. Everyone was so desperate to be seen. We embodied the starving creative, and it's quite embarrassing. We need to understand the value of our own work and sell it accordingly, which is why I think that when you have creative agencies, that's a step in the right direction. My hot take is that I think everyone is going to be a creative agency unto themselves, because instead of having 4 or 5 designers executing on your creative direction, you've got an army of robots with AI that can execute on your direction going forward. So everyone is going to be their own creative director. That's the way I see the future. But in order to properly do that, we need to understand the value of our own work. It's really, really important. Another issue is that creatives can feel sometimes that we are subsidizing our employer's prestige with our own mental health. The discourse has shifted from how do I get this job to is this job even worth it? Again, this comes down to long hours, not a lot of pay, and precarious contracts. Now, I've been quite fortunate in my career where I haven't necessarily had to deal with that too much, but I've got friends in the industry who definitely have. And the important thing I'd say is, one, in the creative industries, we need to stop gatekeeping how to get around these things. There are plenty of resources now that are out there that can teach creatives on how to navigate this. In the UK, Major Players is a great one. So would recommend looking at the resources there. Sonder as well, Sondr, gives a ton of opportunities to creatives that we may not otherwise get. So those are 2 resources. I'm sure there's plenty more. I think the gatekeeping, especially in London, has decreased quite a lot, but it's still there, unfortunately. And we need to be able to, there's plenty of food, there's enough for everyone to eat. We need to be able to share the sugar and share the knowledge with everyone. A pro tip that I heard about is, in terms of understanding the supply and demand tension and trying to match your income to the amount of stress that you're under, is that if you're fully booked and you're fully tapped out, that's cause to raise your prices. If customers leave to go somewhere else, it means that the mathematical justification for that is that we have an issue in our value proposition because we're being commoditized. If our customer or if our client just is happy to go to the cheapest person and you happen to be the cheapest at the time, therefore when you raise your prices they go elsewhere because they can find somewhere cheaper, it means that you are a commodity, and it's being a commodity is just a race to zero. So in that instance, we need to work on our version of the value equation. The value equation, I've said it tons of times before, it's client stream outcome multiplied by their perceived likelihood of achieving that outcome, all of that divided by time delay and effort and sacrifice on the client's part. So if we can make the multiplied total of client stream outcome and perceived likelihood of achievement, if we can make that as high as possible, and we can make the time delay and the effort and sacrifice from the client as low as possible, then we can charge infinite. That's the promise of this value equation from Alex Hormozy. If we are being commoditized, i.e., if it's a race to the bottom, then we should work on our version of the value equation, i.e., we should try to understand the client better. What actually would their dream outcome be? Can we achieve their dream outcome better? Can we give them a greater perceived likelihood of achieving that dream outcome? Or can we do the work quicker? Can we do it with less effort and sacrifice on the client's part? If we can, if we can add those components, then we can reasonably charge more without tweaking too much. A lot of people say the easiest way to earn more money is just double your prices, just like that. It's not necessarily the case as easy as that, but if you are fully booked, that is a reason to increase your price because your demand is outweighing your supply. That's literally the tension right there. If you're fully booked, it means that's it. You're tapped out. So you can't take on any more clients. And you should probably have a little bit of space to be able to take on more clients, or at least have some time in the future. However, if you raise your prices and your clients stay, then that could be an indication that you are over-servicing them in the first place, and the raise in price is appropriate anyway. So it's always worth looking into that just in case, just to see whether you are being commoditized or whether you're over-servicing. Or maybe your price is exactly right and you actually just need to get more clients if you're not fully booked. Okay, moving swiftly on. Data and cultural commentators have noticed from my research a shift in the values of work. So we have fundamentally left the hustle era of 2015 to 2020, and we're in the middle, maybe towards the end of the intentional era. So the hustle era had the primary goal of career progression and titles, whether it be creative director or art director or whatever it is in your industry. The work ethic was a grind set. So working longer hours was seen as a value unto yourself. It was seen as something to be proud of, right? In terms of loyalty, a lot of people would stay for 3 to 5 years and climb internally because there would be regular opportunities for climbing the corporate ladder. And you would be loyal to the company because you felt like the company was loyal to you, basically. There's a lot of prestige that came with working with the company and working with brands. There was a lot of pride there. And you could say the dream role was to be a creative director or something. Whereas now, our primary goal is financial stability and time affluence. So financial stability is what it says on the tin. It's being financially stable, financially comfortable, financially literate, and time affluence means having some agency over your time. It means being able to work and then do jujitsu or go to the gym or go on dates or go to the art gallery or whatever it might be. Okay. The work ethic that we're seeing right now is there's a phrase that I came across, act your wage. I If you're getting paid a lot of money, then that justifies a lot of work. But if you're getting paid pennies, then you're not earning, so there's no need to work. This is not reflective necessarily of my thoughts and beliefs. This is what I have observed online doing research for this episode. Another aspect of the work ethic piece is that boundaries are seen as good. It's seen as healthy to have boundaries with work. Whereas previously, staying at work for 16, 18 hours was seen as something to be proud of. In terms of loyalty, nowadays we're seeing a lot of people job hopping every 12, 18, 24 months for salary bumps. As simple as that. One of the earliest pieces of advice that I got in my career in 2021 was the more you move companies, the faster you'll progress in your career. And I got that advice at the start of this intentional era, and it seems like it's stayed that way. In terms of prestige, so the prestige doesn't come with the name of the company, especially big brand names like Nike or Apple or something. The prestige comes from having flexibility, having remote options, having ethical alignment with your company, being able to work abroad for some time. You know, it's not about the brand that you're working for so much anymore. It's about the flexibility that that job offers you and how much that job aligns with who you are as a person. And nowadays, rather than the dream role being creative director, even though I'm sure it is for a lot of people, the major dream role is this solopreneur or this creator middle class. Everyone wants to be a creator, myself included. So these are the dream roles that people are going into now. To be fair, at the start of your career, it's it's okay to not know what the dream role is, I don't think. But we're now seeing that rather than being a very strict, I want to get to the top of this company, people are more open to getting to the top of the company, but also going it alone and becoming a business unto themselves, basically. Another Reddit thread that I saw is discussing whether loyalty in jobs is becoming a trap, whether jobs take advantage of you because you're so loyal. I'm not going to click into the thread, but it's just evident of what it is that people are talking about. That thread is from 8 months ago, so it's very recent. It's the summer of 25. One of the deep insights that we can draw from all of this data is that it's not laziness that I'm talking about here. This is all a rational response to a broken social contract and a broken economics contract. This corporate ladder is increasingly being viewed as a scam where loyalty gets penalized. So, data from career forums suggests that job hopping is actually the only reliable mechanism for financial survival. And that renders the concept of paying your dues obsolete in a job, because increasingly we're seeing that people feel like they're just being taken advantage of in the same company. And again, just to repeat it, the quiet quitting phenomenon has evolved into a more permanent psychological detachment from labor. Creatives are struggling to reconcile their innate desire to do good work with their refusal to be exploited by this whole we are family story that agencies can create. Okay, there's no we are family if you're not being looked after. So people are just psychologically withdrawing from this culture and from their work in general. Again, 11 days ago from the time of recording this podcast, someone was posted a Reddit thread saying, should I job hop or should I be loyal to my company? 6 months ago, another Reddit thread, are corporate jobs no longer attractive to the younger generation? And I don't really think that they are in a lot of cases, specifically with a lot of creative jobs, unfortunately. So that's a lot of the data. That's what I've observed. But this podcast is about doing things by design and doing things intentionally. And I feel like I'm somewhat uniquely positioned to discuss how to maintain high performance in a high pressure environment without succumbing to what could be considered as toxic elements of hustle culture. Now, speaking completely freely, I was the person at university to get up at 5 a.m, go to the gym, then go to the library for 7 o'clock and work all day. So I have done that. And I think there is a time to do that. I think it's important to do that for 3 to 6 months just to prove to yourself that you can do that. But I was doing that without any pressure to do that. My income wasn't dependent on my doing that. That was a very free decision that I decided to do for myself. But it means that I know if I need to tap into that, then I can. So I think it's worth doing that for some time in an environment where the only pressure to do it is on yourself. Now, if you're already in a job, how is it that you do that? Well, if you have the ability to, I'd recommend doing something before work, doing something difficult before work. Everyone always says, eat the frog first, whether it's going for a walk, going for a jog, going for a run, going to the gym, whatever it could be. Doing something out of your comfort zone, a little bit difficult before work, means you've eaten the frog. And generally, for anything like me, it means that nothing can actually touch you for the rest of the day because you've already done the hard thing. There's a positive element to this hustle culture. However, I also think that there's something to be said for not doing that, especially in the creative industries. I find that I get creative block if I am under pressure to come up with creative ideas. So you also need to have a system where you can be disciplined in allowing your mind to think. So rather than grabbing your phone, for example, maybe you take a walk or maybe you go to a gallery or something like that. Whatever it is that can reliably get you into a creative zone, we can do that. And that's something that I need to work on because it's far too easy for me to grab my phone. So maybe the eating the frog isn't so much going to the gym, for example, it's actually just sitting doing nothing, to get my brain into a position where I can receive ideas better. And a final word on the passion economy. I went for what I'm passionate about, and I'm very, very glad that I did. But that's not to say that I haven't experienced the fact that passion means suffering, because there are a few ways that I've suffered because of it. Not in any, dramatic way, but there are a few ways where life would have been easier if I hadn't done that. So you don't get to do what you don't necessarily get to have it all at the start. I think that's important to understand. Passion is defined by what it is that you're willing to suffer for. And if you choose to be passionate about something, then you've got to be willing to suffer for it. We can't say, I'm passionate about this, I'm going to go for it, and it's all going to be roses and everything's going to fall into place, because it's not. We need to shift it. It's what is it that you're willing to suffer for? But having said that, we also need to be smart about how it is that we're suffering. It is possible to love the work that we do whilst rejecting exploitation. I don't think the suffering has to be being exploited, but I think it's important to keep things in context. If we're learning, if we're earning, or if we're growing, if we're doing one of any of those things, then we're good. Two of any of those things, then we're great. Three of any of those things, then I don't think we have any reason to complain because we're getting everything that we could want out of a job. So those are a few ways that I think about this whole dream job. I don't necessarily think it's a scam. I think the biggest scam that we tell ourselves is the lie that if we're passionate about something, everything will fall into place, because that's not the way it is. If we're passionate about something, the only thing that's guaranteed is that we'll suffer. And that's in the definition of the name. So if you're passionate about something, great. Just be willing to suffer for it. And that's my piece. I hope you have a great Monday. I hope you have a great start to 2026. Keep up all the resolutions. Don't succumb to dropping off really quickly. If you enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Please like, please subscribe, please tell a friend, share it with someone who you think might need to hear it as well. Please give any feedback that you've got. I'd really appreciate it. I look at everything, I read everything that you all say, and it's really, really appreciated. Thank you once again for listening, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great week.